Cafe Networking podcast promotes successful business experts. I'm Tom Rioch, known as the King of Networking, connecting people throughout the world from my podcast studio in Brazil. Joining us today from Ottawa, Canada, Helen Ofosu, industrial and organizational psychologist, coach and consultant, author of How to Be Resilient in Your Career. So Helen, we hear a lot about workplace inclusion, but rarely inclusion and trauma. Why?
Well, I think first off, most people don't think about the workplace as being a place where there's any trauma happening. But because I'm a psychologist and I've been thinking about things differently, I've come to realize that anyone who's not part of the majority and is mistreated because of their gender or their race or ethnicity or their religion or sexual orientation, all of those people, when they're part of an out-group and they're consistently treated or mistreated, I guess, as part of an out-group, they're experiencing lots of microaggressions and basically small t traumas. These are things that have a way of creating overactivity or overreactivity in our nervous systems. And apparently, according to neurobiology and according to psychiatry now, all of these small t traumas have a way of adding up and becoming equal in terms of impact to the traditional big T traumas. So things like being assaulted or being in a big accident or living through a natural disaster. So that's why I like to think about inclusion as a way to minimize or eliminate a lot of these small T traumas that are happening to people at work. And the other piece that's not so obvious is that when people are being mistreated, obviously they need to figure out a way to protect themselves and to survive. And so if you have people who are trying to contribute at work, but 20 or 30% of their mental and emotional energy is going into self-protection, it means they have less bandwidth, less energy to put into doing their real work. So that's why I think inclusion and workplace trauma are definitely linked. And not only is there a moral imperative, but there's a practical imperative to.
I can see that. And I've taken what you said, and I think that's a real point, is microaggression. And many times we only see or feel as a person something that's more than micro. And the micro it builds itself. It's a negative energy that you sort of intake, and that could wear you down.
Absolutely.
And I've seen what you say on your site. So you say several common career-related setbacks, and those setbacks could be daily occurrences of conflict within an organization.
Absolutely. So in that book, I guess the website's theresilientcareer.com, but the book, How to Be Resilient in Your Career, it's really about understanding certain common setbacks, things like underemployment, dealing with a toxic workplace, dealing with discrimination or harassment or bullying, understanding those things so that hopefully you can prevent them from really hurting your career in the first place. But if you're living through some of these things, that's a good resource to try to understand better and how to navigate differently so that you can survive these setbacks.
And we can see today, statistics are showing that the younger generation has lost, let's say, its loyalty in the corporation world. And maybe they see that and feel that. And that's part of it, isn't it?
Absolutely. Younger people are not as tolerant of working in a bad work environment. They don't like looking around and seeing people burning out, seeing people, tolerating all kinds of mistreatment. So I'm optimistic because I don't think Gen Z and even millennials really want to work in these kinds of environments. So they're more motivated to see everybody's humanity and see everybody's ability to contribute and get away from situations where somehow these bad behaviors are tolerated.
Well, your book is geared to persons that are not only suffering from that, but sort of a wake-up call before they get there.
Absolutely. But I'd also say that the book is a good wake-up call for leaders and for HR folks. Because sometimes, depending on your position in an organization, you have a very filtered, curated perspective on things, right? Depending on your position, people don't tell you certain things.
Right.
So these are things that are probably happening to a lot of people, but depending on who you are and what your role is, you just might not hear about it. So it's kind of hiding in plain sight.
And I can see that, and I agree with you. So you help readers bounce back and move forward. So even if they do come into situations while they're still in the company, there's still the bouncing mechanism. You have to be resilient.
Well, that's it. And I like to remind people that the book is about developing career resilience, so they don't need to over-rely on their personal resilience. Right?
But they both fit together.
They fit together for sure. And, I think this whole piece about bouncing back, often, depending on how bad things have been at work, a lot of my clients, a lot of readers would benefit from some support from a mental health professional, whether it's a clinical psychologist, a therapist, a social worker, a counselor. And a lot of those folks, if they've always been in private practice, they haven't been seeing some of these things and how they unfold in larger organizations. So this book has proven to be a good resource for those mental health professionals so they can be better informed and maybe even suggest it as a resource to their clients.
Very good. So how can our listeners find you?
The easiest way is theresilientcareer.com. All the links to my socials are there. The book is available on Amazon. It's available on Audible.
And you also mentioned before on local bookstores.
Oh, yes, absolutely. I do like to support local booksellers. It's nice to know that we have small businesses, right? Because they do drive a lot of our economies.
It's very good. Well, thanks for being here and sharing your expertise.
My pleasure. Thank you, Tom.
And again, for our listeners, it's Helen Ofosu, Helen, the last name Ofosu. Find her on LinkedIn, her site, theresilientcareer.com, and her book, How to Be Resilient in Your Career, on Amazon. Cafe Networking is brought to us by Focus MI Market Intelligence, an agricultural market research specialist in Brazil. More information at focusmi.com. Talk to Tom, talk to the world. Thanks for listening. Until the next time here at Cafe and Networking Podcast.